and welcome to our webinar, Simplilearn webinar, how ITIL combines with the 4 pillars of digital transformation. Our guest today is Akshay Anand, who is the product ambassador from Axelos. We work with their partner PeopleCert, who issues certifications for the courses we run. And our host today will be Pankaj Kumar Pathak, who is a product manager for our ITIL training courses. First, a few instructions on how to operate the WebEx controls. Mainly use the Q&A function to enter questions for our host and speaker. We will collect those questions and address them in the Q&A portion of the webinar towards the end. If you have a message for us during the webinar, use the chat function. Remember to ask all panelists, which will let you get the message to all of us rather than just to me. And in each case, remember to hit the send button. I'd like to start with a quick poll, if I may. And let's give a moment here. The poll is going to be on how you're feeling today and what your current job role is. One moment.
I can see a few eager beavers already starting to ask questions.
Yeah. I'm going to skip the poll because I've had a problem setting it up. And I'm going to go right back to introductions. So first I would like to introduce Pankaj Kumar Pathak, who is our product manager here at Simplilearn for ITIL. And he will introduce Akshay Anand. And on to you, Pathak.
Yes, I'll get started. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stuart, for the introduction. That really helps. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Right. We are here to discuss about how ITL combines with the digital transformation. Let me introduce you, Akshay, with us first. So Akshay Anand is a product ambassador at Axelos, who's working on the development on new guidance and research within the IT service management portfolio. He is also lead architect of ITL4 and has written guidance across multiple ITL4 publications. He previously advised Fortune 100 clients on how to improve their ITSM capabilities, implemented tool sets such as Remedy and ServiceNow, and also headed up global ITSM activities at Macmillan Publishing. More recently, Akshay has also focused on bringing together agile development teams and ITSM professionals to address. Right. So, Akshay, why don't you say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone.
Great. So before even jumping on to talking about how ITL will be combining with the digital transformation, I would also like to ask Akshay that let us first define what digital transformation means in today's world, because we keep hearing about digital transformation every now and then, right? Now every person has a different meaning of digital transformation. Everybody seems to have a different understanding about digital transformation. For me, I feel digital transformation is not only about technology, but it is about the complete business modeling aspect of it, but we would definitely would be great if you can share some lights about digital transformation and what are the four pillars which makes the digital transformation.
Okay, sure. First of all, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Just a reminder, this is an AMA, so I do hope people have some interesting questions. It is, after all, Ask Me Anything. So the best explanation of digital transformation that I've come across, and one that I subscribe to, is one proposed by a gentleman called Charles Arojo, who's based out of New York. He's been a long-time speaker on conference circuits. He's held several positions of importance in IT management in general. To paraphrase him slightly, the way he describes digital transformation is that it's a change to a business model in an environment where customers are highly empowered, and one in which technology plays an enabling role. And I think it's really important to break that down. So the first and foremost is it's a change to the business model. So this isn't just putting in a bit of new technology or even cutting edge technology to do, eke out another 5-10% in terms of efficiencies. You're introducing a radical change to your business model. And a business model is not just about the tech, it's also about how you go to market, how you fulfill custom demand, how you generate custom demand. What are the key relationships with your suppliers and other stakeholders in the ecosystem? What's your revenue model, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, the business model canvas is an excellent framing device to think of what a business model is. So first and foremost, it's a radical change to your business model. And the second part is customers who are highly empowered. Now, that empowerment can come in a variety of ways. We are in an era of social media and other online outlets. And so customers who perhaps did not have a voice before are now finding that they do have a voice. They can call out bad behavior. They can call out good behavior. And that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is that customers in a lot of industries are now starting to enjoy little to no switching costs. And that has a significant impact on the business model. So I'll give you an example. I probably subscribe to nearly every movie streaming device and music streaming device in the planet, right? If I can't find a song on Apple Music, I'll go to Spotify. If I can't find it on Spotify, I'll go to Amazon Prime. If I can't find it on Amazon Prime, I'll probably go to YouTube. And it's almost certain that I'll find it on YouTube somewhere. But the point is, beyond the little bit of time investment that I needed to put in, I had zero switching costs because even YouTube has a free tier, Spotify has a free tier. They all have free tiers. So customers are increasingly enjoying little to zero switching costs, and they can switch between providers with relative ease than what they used to have. And then the third part of that explanation is that technology plays an enabling role. Certainly, technology is crucial. It is the channel, the vehicle by which you're delivering your services, whether that's insurance services, entertainment services, media services, whatever. The product, the software, the technology is definitely a channel, but the technology in of itself has no value. It's what you're able to do with the technology. It's how the technology enables a service that is important. And a prime example, I'm sure everyone has a banking app on their smartphone in this day and age. The app in of itself has zero value. The value of the app is connecting you with your bank or your financial provider, allowing you to pay your bills or to make a transaction or something like that. The product is your channel to the service. The second part of your question, Pankaj, was around the four pillars. Now,
Yes.
Based on the research that we've done within Axelos over the last several years, we've studied not only the stories of successful transformation, but also stories of failures. Studying is more important than it is studying success. Right? I mean, there's that anecdote from World War II where when aircraft engineers wanted to find out where they needed to add extra armor to the fighter planes, they didn't look at where the holes were. They were looking at where the holes weren't, as it were. So we've done a fair bit of research, and we came up with this model to talk about the different aspects of digital transformation. And those different aspects, or those four pillars, are the customer and employee experience, because it's not just customer experience that needs to change, it's also the employee experience that needs to change. It's the organization's values and behaviors, or if you will, the culture, quote unquote, of the organization. It's, of course, the business model, as I just talked about. And then, of course, there's operational excellence. These are four different aspects of digital transformation. And regardless of your starting point, you will end up touching on all these pillars.
Great, great. Thanks a lot for explaining about the definition of digital transformation first. So Akshay, my first question, now we can start with the ITL part of it, is basically how is ITIL or ITSM is combining with the digital transformation in the new age technologies?
It's a really good question. I think there's a couple of parts to that answer. The first is, we have to acknowledge, in many organizations, ITSM is seen as a purely infrastructure or technical operational capability, which could not be further from the truth. But that is the reality of many organizations today. And we see that such organizations are facing a tremendous amount of pressure to quickly update their service management capabilities. But the years of underinvestment, if you will, are now starting to pay off with bitter fruits, as it were. So we definitely see that a lot of organizations are looking at trying to transform and invest in their operational and infrastructure capabilities to elevate those capabilities so that the other parts of the transformation, the business model transformation, or the cultural transformation, or the employee experience transformation, can therefore be transformed. Other organizations, a smaller subset, I will admit, see service management as a strategic capability. They understand that service management is not just limited to infrastructure or technical operations, but it is truly about managing the service, whether that's managing a technical service, managing a business service, or anything in between. And we see organizations now starting to understand that service management is a far more wide-reaching discipline or capability, which touches upon every aspect of an organization, of a service organization, from financial management to portfolio management and project management, risk management, and so on. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in those areas are necessarily ITIL or ITSM professionals, but this is about a cultural step, a mindset, a sea change in the mindset. It's a step in the right direction to understand that we are all service organizations, and we need to start behaving in service-oriented ways, regardless of which framework we pick, regardless of how many frameworks we pick. It's about understanding that there are certain fundamentals when it comes to service management.
That is really great to understand about how this is combining with the four pillars of digital transformation. Now, my next question is, we wanted to understand about how ITIL adapted to evolving IT and system practices.
That goes quite far back, actually, to, I guess, 2016, 2017, when we first started working on the seeds of what would become ITIL 4. Of course, the architect team that we had in place brought a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. We all recognize that the relative positioning of technology within a service organization had been elevated since ITIL version 3 was first published back in 2007. I mean, once it was published back in 2007, we have to remember that the lead time for publishing a book like this is measured in years. It's not measured in days. So the publication of a lot of ITIL version 3 guidance was grounded in what practitioners were experiencing in 2004, 2005, 2006. And we're talking about 13, 14 years ago. Cloud computing was just starting to come about and be talked about. Agile had the Agile Manifesto was only about 4 or 5 years old at that point. So whilst we now talk about these things as everyday things, we recognize that there's been a massive shift in how IT and ITSM needs to work because of these movements in software development, in computational technology, and so on. So when we met together as an architect, we had certain things that we had to be able to solve for. We had to be able to show people, show ITSM professionals how to work in a lean and an agile manner, for example. No, let me take a step back. We had to show ITSM professionals how to work with lean and agile professionals in other parts of the business. To do that, we had to figure out a way to make ITSM and ITIL 4, what back then we called it ITIL X, but we had to make ITIL X itself lean and agile. So that was the starting point of thinking that if we cannot make our own domain lean and agile, we can't expect our practitioners to be able to work with other practitioners from across the organization. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that people who are picking up ITIL 4 recognize the value that had been pulled forward from ITIL version 3 and 2011. Certainly, we didn't want to say that all the investments in the past, whether that was training or certifications or tooling or consultancy, we didn't want to say any of that had been in vain, and now they had to sort of, slash and burn everything and start all over again. This was about saying, look, we need to evolve as an industry. Here are some steps to evolve while preserving the goodness of best practice, but also here's the way forward. Here's where the industry is headed. So those were the sorts of things that were in the back of our mind as we started to develop the models. The lean and agile thing, I think to a large extent we have satisfied. Is it perfect? No, but that's also part of ITIL 4's commitment to its own continual improvement. We are always reviewing the feedback that comes in. We're always looking at ways in which we can improve the quality of our books, our guidance, as well as all the other materials that we offer. And if any of your listeners have certain thoughts they want to share based on their experience, please do pass that along to us. The best address is ask@axelos.com. Just send an email in to say feedback for ITIL development team and just put down your thoughts. We do read each and every one of them. We don't respond to each and every one of them because we get a lot, but we do read each and every one of them. And a lot of times those pieces of feedback lead to a lot of interesting discussions. Sorry, I could just waffle on. So you need to just tell me when to stop.
Yeah. I got it. Now, I actually remember when you said when the seed came for the ITL 4 back in 2016 to 17, and finally I think ITL 4 released in approximately 2009. Since Feb 2019, when ITL 4 was launched till now, how do you see people reacting and adapting to the ITL 4 versus ITL V3?
I think the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive. I know there were some skeptics back in the day, but I think as they've digested the materials, the new concepts, they've come to recognize the value of a lot of these concepts. I've seen a lot of organizations who have just been blown away with something like the guiding principles, and they've made it a part of their organization's culture or discussions that we need to keep these guiding principles, focus on value, collaborate and promote visibility, start where you are, think and work holistically, and so on. I've seen a lot of organizations really take to those principles because those principles about culture, about mindset change. It doesn't necessarily lead to a massive tool shift project or a massive process reengineering project, but it allows you to start structuring your thinking in a certain way towards, in a certain direction, and it allows you to bring the rest of the organization along as well. I've seen a lot of interesting things around that, and we do encourage people to submit case studies to us. We've published a few case studies recently. There's been CERN, which is I always forget the acronym, but I always refer to it as the Large Hadron Collider Research Organization over in Switzerland. University of Oxford, I think, is coming out soon. I think, what else have we published? Last year, we published Spotify. We published Amadeus, which is a big B2B company that runs a lot of airline operational infrastructure. So we see a lot of organizations starting to really pick up on ITIL 4 concepts, be it guiding principles or stream mapping or using the 4 dimensions to think about how they structure their internal teams and capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of positive vibes and positive reactions coming out now.
Got it. So it is happening both from the consumer side of it, the different kind of enterprises, and they are just giving the responses, overwhelming responses. Right. Thanks for that answer, Akshay. Now, my next question is, what are the benefits of applying ITIL best practices to digital transformation initiatives?
So the beauty of applying ITIL to something like digital transformation is that when you keep in the forefront of your mind, you keep the concepts of adapt and adopt and continually improve in the forefront, you will understand that ITIL is essentially the starting point of a journey. It's not the solution, it's not the end point, but it provides you with certain mental models and concepts that will help you structure your thinking, structure your discussions, and structure your decision making. So, for example, in the high velocity IT book, we talk about Kinevin. I think we also talk about Kinevin in digital and IT strategy book. And Kinevin is a decision making or sense making framework. I'd encourage your audience to go look it up. There's a lot of free stuff available on YouTube. We also reference things like Wardley maps. These are amazing techniques out there which allow you to start to apply ITIL or ITSM best practice, but merging it in with best practices or frameworks that have emerged from other domains. So you're now starting to look at your digital transformation journey from multiple perspectives. You're using the language and the terminology and base dimensions, etc., from ITIL, but then you're combining that with decision-making or sense-making frameworks and techniques from Kanban, Lean, Agile, Kinevin, etc., etc. And that provides you with a well-rounded perspective. And that's how, again, remember, adapt and adopt, continually improve. ITIL is not the solution. ITIL is not the end point. ITIL is the starting point of that journey.
Right. Great. So, I think the questions related to digital transformation, which I wanted to ask, I think I'm having a hold of it, and I'm getting few questions as well. Do you think we can take a few questions?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, great. So I have a question in front of me, which is basically regarding the ITL4 book. So the question is, where is the ITL4 book? Where in the ITL4 book can the 4 pillars be found?
The 4 pillars are not. I don't believe they're in any book. They're a construct or a framework by which we talk about these things, but I don't think have we built it in. Sorry, I'm having to think now. I believe we do reference it in digital and IT strategy, now that I think about it. So the book that the latest book to be published, which is at this point less than a month old, is where we explicitly reference the 4 pillars model.
Okay. Right. So the next question has come on from Imran, and that how are the ITSM tools getting evolved? Example, BMC remedy to subscription model.
It's a good question. All I can say is, look, the tools are managed by their own companies. They have their own roadmaps. To share the roadmap with anyone outside those companies, which is fair enough. That's product management 101. Having said that, we've involved a number of practitioners and architects and experts from various tool vendors in the development of ITIL 4, and we will continue to do so. Some people prefer to be advising us, or we consult with them. Some folks have chosen to author for us. Some people have chosen to review the materials and provide their feedback. So the involvement from the tool vendors has been varied. In terms of, are you suddenly going to see an ITIL 4 branded tool set? I can't answer that. We don't manage the tool sets.
Understood. Right. So the next question, this is a little interesting question. It's basically from Jay Trivedi asking about what is the difference between ITSM and ITIL?
Okay, ITSM, IT Service Management, is a domain which is concerned with the management of services which are either supported by technology or wholly delivered using technology. They may be technical services, they may be business services which have technical underpinnings, but it is the management of those services that we refer to as ITSM. Uh, ITIL is one framework within the broader domain of ITSM. There are other frameworks as well.
Oh, that's great. So, would you mind just letting us know about what are the other frameworks in ITSM?
There's several ISO frameworks, COBIT for IT governance. There's let's see, I don't know whether you'd call DevOps a framework necessarily, but let's call it a framework. DevOps, Agile, these are also approaches and frameworks within the broader space of service management.
Yes, yes, correct. Right. That is great. So, Royce, I have a question from Royce. He wants us to talk about more on the spirit behind the case studies within the DITS training.
Okay. Any specific aspect of it?
There's no, I don't see any specific aspect. It's just that they just want to understand about, spirit behind the case studies. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'll try my best, Royce. So with digital IT strategy, we're trying to reach an audience who has a great deal, many years of experience more than your than many other candidates or delegates in an ITIL class. I mean, it says on the tin, digital IT strategy, and so we want to reach people who are operating at a much more senior level, either leading teams or teams of teams, or who are involved with the management of the service organization strategy. Because of the seniority, but also because of the subjects that we tackle in digital IT strategy, we felt that a simple or relatively simple multiple choice question might not be sufficient. And we looked at ways in which we could provide a much more interactive, um, conversational style of assessment, which is why we went to the sort of group discussion type of mechanism. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily translate when you are taking training from an online provider and studying at your own pace and so on, but there are workarounds for that. But we tried to create this group discussion type of an atmosphere by creating these case studies. Now, it's a very simple case study. There are three companies. There's a customer of certain types of services. There's an incumbent provider of those services. And then there's a startup trying to become a disruptor in that space as well, in providing those sorts of services. And we use this very simple case study to explore things like how you would apply the guiding principles to evolving strategy, how you would use other ITIL concepts, and as well as certain concepts that are described in the book that you will be covering in your training, how you would apply them to this fictional case, so that delegates have a chance to experiment and explore these concepts in a safe environment before going back into their day jobs and then having to apply this in real life situations. And that was really the thinking behind the case study method.
Got it. Yep, that really makes sense. So, the next question is around, let me go through. It's about when is the training and certification of ITL4 leader, digital and IT strategy commencing? If I'm not mistaken, it has already gone live.
It has gone live. The product launched on September the 26th, I believe.
Yes, yes, that is correct. So, I'll take up the next question, which has come from us, Ashwini Kumar, talking about ITL V3 books kind of start off with an overview and expand of the process in the intermediate levels. But ITL 4 looks different. Foundation provides a very good the overview of the guidelines and value. At intermediate level, Though interrelated, the book seems to be independent of the foundation. Am I missing something, or how was this envisaged?
I don't think you could say that the books are independent of Foundation. They, of course, build on all the basic concepts in Foundation. So you still see guiding principles, four dimensions, service value chain, practices, et cetera, in each of the four books in Managing Professional and certainly in Digital and IT Strategy as well. However, where the architecture of the books have changed is that the practices themselves, which is what the quote unquote processes of ITIL version 3 were evolved into. The practices themselves are published separately from the books. So, whereas you could open, let's say, service operations and read everything that there was about incident, problem, request, access, etc., with Create, Deliver, and Support book, which is possibly the nearest mapping that I can provide. In the Create, Deliver, and Support book, you will read about how to use ITIL 4 concepts to help them to facilitate the management of that creation, delivery, and support. So you will read more about the application of the practices themselves rather than the actual details of the practices. The practices, again, incident, request, etc., have all been published digitally separately from the books because we recognize that in this day and age, the practices themselves are evolving at a fairly rapid pace. To publish it in a book that perhaps didn't see an update for, let's say, 2 years meant that we miss at least two opportunities to update the guidance itself, because it would involve a tremendous amount of change to the books and the stock of old books versus new books, etc., etc. So what we did very deliberately is within the space called My Axelos, which is a section of the Axelos website, we decided to publish all the practices in PDF format for now. Maybe that'll change later, but that will allow us to update the specifics of the practice as quickly as we need to. Having said that, there are certain, shall we say, constants for each practice. Purpose statement, basic terminology, basic concepts, and something new that we're calling practice success factors, which is what needs to be done or you need to be able to do in order to make that practice successful. So, for example, with incident management, a practice success factor for incident management would be the ability to detect incidents early. Another one could be to resolve incidents as quickly as possible. They're simple ones, but these are things that are needed in order for the practice of incident management to be successful. So when you go to the Create, Deliver, and Support book, you will read about how to apply incident management. You won't read about incident management itself. So the guidance has actually been split across two different publications. And that's a change in the architecture that people need to understand.
Oh, that's great. I hope, Ashwini, you got your answer. So the next question is regarding, it's from Doris Chaya. Can you advise in digital transformation as for theses? What are the best questions to ask to contribute to digital transformation that was not there before and one must have in order to go beyond general knowledge?
That was a long question, and I don't think I actually understood it. So, sorry, Pankaj, would you mind repeating the question?
Yes, absolutely, Akshay. The question is, can you advise in digital transformation as for thesis? What are the best questions to ask to contribute to digital transformation that was not there before and one must have in order to go to beyond general knowledge?
I must admit, I'm still struggling with the question after you've repeated it a second time. Um, Look, if I were a practitioner and I was in a workshop to talk about my organization's digital transformation, I'd start by asking questions like, why? What is the impetus to talk about digital transformation? Because I would want to qualify what my organization meant by digital transformation. Did they mean implementing new tools? Did they mean um, developing software quickly? Did they mean actually um, changing the business model itself? You use the word thesis, which is also intriguing because I'm wondering whether Doris is coming at this from a research perspective. There's a fair amount of research that's already out there, academic research that's already out there on this topic of digital transformation. But again, I would still start by examining whether, what percentage of successful digital transformations were effective at changing the business model. What percentage of failures came down to lack of organizational change management or communication, for example. Um, that's probably where I'd start the conversation. So I apologize, Doris. I'm not sure I understand the question too well. If you'd like to ask it in another way, I'd be happy to take that up again.
Well, but still, you tried, Akshay, answering that question as well. So I'll move on to the next question, which is coming from Mitrapal Chauhan. Is basically how can we convince the leadership and customer the benefits of exploring ITIL even further, as introducing new modules possesses some risk that always bring reservation. With digital transformation, customer is more looking the things from the lens of technical management.
Um, it's a really good question. Certainly, we need to be able to manage upwards as we start to introduce or pitch the idea of investing further in ITIL 4. To my mind, as I think I mentioned before, it's about reestablishing the fact that your organization is a service organization. It's not a technology organization. It's a service organization that's trying to leverage technology to its greatest advantage. And being a service organization isn't just about investing in technology. It's about looking at your end-to-end business model or your operating model. And I would recommend sorry, I forget who asked the question.
That was Mitpal Chauhan.
Okay, Mitrapal, I would recommend you go and look at a couple of artifacts that you can find online, but are also in the digital IT strategy book from ITIL 4, called the Operating Model Canvas and the Business Model Canvas. And I would put this up in front of your executives as a starting point for a discussion to say, look, if you're thinking about changing the way we work for the better, these are the different aspects you have to think about. It's not just about the technology, it's also about the skills and the competencies we need. It's about our relationship with our customers. It's about our relationship with our suppliers. It's about how we account for the work that we're doing and the costs that we incur, how we account for the revenues that we're making, and so on. Because the business model canvas and operating model canvas are not idle constructs. They are very well defined and established business analysis constructs or artifacts. They come from that world. And any leader, in my mind, any leader worth their salt knows these two canvases. And if you use that canvas as a starting point to say, look, ITIL 4 talks about business model canvas, talks about operating model canvas, talks about the need to change certain things. It provides guidance of how to go about making those changes, what good might look like. It is worth our investment. That's possibly the second way in which I would approach that question. Answer that question.
I think yes. Now it's in Mitrapal's hand to go forward and take it ahead. Moving on to the next question, which is coming from Tawfiq, is basically what is the best way to start migrate from ITL V3 to ITL 4 inside our organization?
Excellent question. I assume you're not talking about certifications. If you are talking about certifications, then there's managing professional transition, there's a whole certification scheme, and I'm sure Pankaj, you and your team at Simplilearn can go back to that person and talk about the certification migration.
Absolutely. But I think this is more related to the organization's perspective, wherein they're currently following the ITL V3 framework and they want to migrate or transition to 4.
Sure. So interestingly, one of the things that slightly controversially, I suppose, one of the things I usually propose is that it's not, you shouldn't be sending your junior staff on ITIL 4 first. You should be sending your managers on ITIL 4 first, because you run the risk of your junior staff coming back really enthused and excited about the new ideas and concepts and models and ways of working introduced in ITIL 4 talks about, but they have no influence to be able to change the way in which they're actually able to work. So my slightly controversial suggestion first, send your managers on the course first. Let them come away with an understanding of the guiding principles and what it means to focus on value or collaborate and promote visibility and so on, because they're the people with the scope of control and the scope of influence which will allow them to actually create the change that people want to see in organizations. Beyond that, I think I actually have an entire webinar on just this topic, and I'll be speaking about it at ITSMF UK later this year and at Service Management World as well. But very briefly, in my mind, there are sort of 3 or maybe 4 options. The first is to start with guiding principles. So, as I said, focus on value, collaborate and promote visibility, etc. These are cultural changes which will take longer to embed in your organization, but will have a higher payoff in the long term. There's a significant amount of cost and risk in the short term, but you have a significant upside in the long term. The second option is to start with continual improvement. So give everybody the headspace to be able to, take an hour away from work every week or a couple of hours where they can work on something new, something that will help them do their jobs better, something that can help their team do the job better. Because that experimentation, that sort of continual improvement will start to reap dividends the further along you go. Of course, you've also got to be able to scan your environment to say, are there any disruptors that will massively change what I'm doing? Because if I'm just focused on the here and now and just making small tweaks to what I'm doing, I might not see those disruptors coming in. The third option is to start with value streams and processes. So adopt techniques like value stream mapping, figure out how work and information flows across the organization from demand to value creation. This is something we write about quite a bit in the Create, Deliver, Support book, how do you go about designing or documenting value streams, use those value streams to identify bottlenecks, use the value streams to identify what capabilities your practices need, so that you identify what capabilities are extraneous or wasted investment from what you currently have, so you can start turning things off. That way you become a much leaner organization. So that's option 3. And option 4 is to actually do all of those 3 simultaneously at different scale, different level, different time frames, but to try to bring about cultural change, invest in a culture of continual improvement, as well as start to lean out your practices by using value stream mapping techniques. So that's a sort of very quick summary of the presentation that I'll be doing later this year. But it was a good question. Thank you for that.
Thanks a lot, Akshay. I think that would really help Tawfiq in going back to the organization and thinking about how they can transition from V3 to 4. The next question is also in similar lines, which is basically ITIL. I followed ITIL V3 curriculum, ITIL expert level. How can you help us move to forward ITIL 4? I think this is pretty straightforward, wherein this is related to the certification part of it, and you can take the ITIL for MP transition module to transition yourself from ITIL V3 expert to ITIL managing professional in the ITIL 4 framework. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is coming from Akshay to Akshay. Is basically he wants you to elaborate on the difference between ITIL for MP and ITIL for SL. So basically, he wants to understand what the difference between managing professional and strategic leader.
Okay.
And who needs to follow which path as well?
Sure. I'll include foundation in that as well, because it'll help to paint the whole story. ITIL Foundation is for essentially newcomers to the field of service management. Now, they could be fresh college grads, they could be senior developers or managers from other parts of the business who are now finding themselves in a position which requires some knowledge of ITIL and service management in general. So foundation is very much that entry level. It gives you the basic concepts, terminology, and so on. Managing professional is then for people who are designing or managing systems of work, is the way I like to talk about it. So you might be a consultant, you might be a manager, you might be, let's say, an individual contributor, but someone with a wide degree of influence. And you might be designing the way in which people work. Like, what are the procedures? What are the tools that are needed? What are the skills that we need, etc.? You might be designing that. You might be managing a team, which and therefore having to look after the tools, the skills, the funding, the partner or supplier relationships, and so on. So the common thread there is you are either designing and or managing these systems of work. And if you're doing that, then managing professional is something you should be looking at. So if your role or if your current role is focused more around stakeholder engagement and management of relationships, then drive stakeholder value is something that you should be looking at. If currently you're trying to solve challenges around creating the appropriate metrics, interfacing with governance, risk, and compliance, managing small organizational changes, then direct, plan, and improve is something you should be looking at. If your role requires you to manage the flow of work across a team or several teams, from design work to development work to transition to support and so on, then create, deliver, support is something you should be looking at. And if you're designing or managing service ITSM capabilities to work in a lean and agile way, then and resilient and continuous way, then high velocity IT is something you should be looking at. So managing professional is very much for those professionals who are designing or managing systems of work. Strategic leader is essentially the next step up, if you will, in the hierarchy of an organization. So here we have very much more senior managers. You're responsible for business model managing your business model. You're responsible for managing your operating model or transforming your business model and operating model. You might be having to undertake larger programs of organizational change and transformation. And if you're working at that much more of a strategic level or starting to move in that direction, then digital and IT strategy and the strategic leader learning stream is one for you. So that's how different learning blocks map out.
Great. Thanks a lot, Akshay, to answer Akshay's question. Moving on to the next question, which is coming from Doris. Okay, just a moment.
While you read through that, I did receive a private question from Saina,
Yeah,
which was, does Jira Service Now, and other ticketing tools come under ITIL/ITSM? So again, ITIL is a framework. A framework is meant to be adapted and adopted. It is a description of ways of working. It's not a tool or a technology. So we can't say that Jira, ServiceNow, Remedy, etc. are ITIL tools. They are IT service management tools. The workflows might be aligned with what ITIL talks about, but they are ITSM tools. They're not ITIL tools. There's no such thing as an ITIL tool. There are ITSM tools.
All right. So the next question is from Doris, and the question is around, if we are analyzing the digital transformation beyond general knowledge post COVID-19, what we should ask ourselves as on business strategy level on which acts of research for any industry to study to go deep in learning. You want me to read that question again?
Please. Or if you could put it in the chat, then I can just read it quickly for myself. And
Yep. Okay. Meanwhile, I'll just put it in the chat. And meanwhile, we can go to the next question as well, which is coming from Abhimanyu. Companies get used to ITIL guiding principle, then don't you think that will affect them in differentiating their performance identity?
no, not at all. Apple Music and Spotify both offer streaming music services, but they're different brands, they're different products. Your guiding principles will help you create value more consistently, more effectively, more efficiently, better customer experience, etc., etc. But your competitive differentiator is in the service you're actually providing. So whether that's banking services, entertainment services, whatever, your competitive differentiator is in the service you're offering, not in how you choose to structure yourself internally. I see you've pasted that. Just give me one
Yes.
second.
Sure.
If I understand the question, I think it is where Doris can do further research to understand more about digital transformation beyond just general knowledge. As I said, there are a lot of academic journals and publications that you can find online, published through open journals or similar. There are some other frameworks which I can definitely highly recommend. Cynefin is one. Wordley mapping is another. There's a lot of mass market literature, if I can call it that I can also recommend for reading purposes. A couple of my favorite books, off the top of my head, Team of Teams, Unlearn, Lean Enterprise, Phoenix Project, of course, DevOps Handbook. I haven't yet read Unicorn Project, but I'm sure it's fabulous given who's written it. I'd also take a look at the science of service management, specifically a series of papers around service dominant logic that were authored by two gentlemen in the States, I believe, called Vargo and Lush. So take a look at the papers that they've published under service science or service dominant logic. There's absolutely fabulous reading.
All right. So moving on to the next question, Akshay, considering the time constraints which we have, there are already a lot of questions, and I'm just picking up the best ones. There's one question which is basically, is about is ITL more for technical use and TOGAF strategy? Basically, enterprise architecture is something which is Gilbert is asking about.
Look, at the end of the day, every framework has emerged in order to address certain issues that emerged, that came about or were commonly felt in specific parts of an organization. ITIL emerged to codify best practice in the UK public sector back in the late 80s. And it was the technology and operations of technology in those days meant that it was very infrastructure centric rather than software centric. Agile emerged in order to understand how to develop software more that was more aligned with the needs of the customers, especially in a fluid and volatile environment. DevOps emerged to understand how to collaborate and share and measure technical matters across the development and operations divide, or indeed how to break down that development and operations divide. I don't believe any framework can claim to be the framework for a specific topic, but different frameworks will have different degrees of focus across the entire stack. So ITIL, for example, certainly has a tremendous amount of focus in the operational stack, relatively less so, but still important amounts of focus at the tactical and strategic stack. A framework like, let's say, an approach like Agile or DevOps has a tremendous amount of focus on the software development side of the stack. They try to address other issues that software development teams will encounter as they start to work in these new ways. And so you start talking about, BizSec, DevOps, BizSec, etc., etc. The acronym becomes longer and longer every time I look at it, because they recognize that it's at the end of the day it's one system, and they need to provide guidance on how to operate with other parts of that system. So I don't think it's correct to say that ITIL only focuses on that and this other framework focuses only on that. It's a degree of the focus. It's about the degree of focus that is provided.
Right. Thanks a lot for answering that question, Akshay. The next question is from Menu. That as a fresher technical analyst, how do we identify our process is applying ITL framework?
My question is, why do you need to apply that? Why do you need to determine that? That's very simply my question. What is the value in saying that this process is applying ITIL principles or not? The question you should be asking yourself is this process creating value for me, for my team, for my customers, for my other stakeholders? If it is, brilliant, move on. If it isn't, why isn't it? And if we want to improve it, what frameworks or best practice guidance exists for us to be able to think about how we can improve it? Just saying that this process is ITIL compliant creates no value. It's just a checkbox exercise.
Absolutely, that makes sense, Akshay. The next question, I'll just take up one more question. I'm not sure I'm running out of time. Maybe Stuart can pitch in. So the next question is from Mohammed. Why hasn't ITL 4 merged with Shift Agile certification?
Agile Shift is its own separate product within Axelos. It's managed by another team who work very closely with us. We work across the different product lines. Agile Shift, as I said, every framework has emerged in order to address specific challenges that are felt in a particular part of an organization. And Agile Shift emerged because there was a need to explain the impact of agile software development or agile ways of working in other parts of the organization. That's why Agile Shift emerged. It's not to say that it's completely separate and unlinked and not linked with ITIL or with Prince2 or with MSP or Prince2 Agile or any of the other frameworks. They are all linked. Again, it's a matter of the focus and the question that's being asked.
Correct. Yep. So I think I have few questions left, but I'm not sure if time will allow me. Stuart, what do you think? Stuart, what do you think we can?
I think you can go ahead.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
ask those
Thanks.
questions.
I'll just take up the next question, which is coming from Ravindranath. Yes. How shall we connect the dots in terms of data analytics and ITL4 in any organization? And the second question, which is maybe a follow-up question, is also I would need to understand the connection between IT product management and ITL4.
Sorry, the second question is understand the relationship between
ITL4 and IT product management.
Okay. So the first question was about data analytics. It is a very important field. We need to understand what the data is telling us, especially across multiple perspectives and domains. And while data analytics is not necessarily addressed as a specific practice within ITIL 4, this has now got me thinking that maybe we should look at that. Certainly, different parts of ITIL talk about how you would use the data to make more informed decisions. Direct Plan and Improve even talks about the different methods of collecting data, whether that's automated tools, whether that's surveys, interviews, et cetera, et cetera. Again, not all data is quantitative, as in derived from tooling. A lot of data is qualitative and anecdotal and derived from narrative techniques. Again, if you look at the Cynefin framework, they do stress on the importance of narratives as a way of, things like weak signal detection. And I think that's especially important as we move to a highly digitized and automated environment. So it's got me thinking for some longer term. Maybe I'll come back in a year and say, yeah, remember the question that you asked? Well, this is the answer to it now.
Yes.
The second question is an interesting one, the relationship between ITIL and product management. In ITIL 4, we talk about product and service management slightly synonymously, but at the same time, if you look at the 4 dimensions model, we see that there are different types of resources that go into the creation of a product or a service. Those resources are the people and the skills, information and tools, which may be products themselves, partners and suppliers who may be providing products themselves, and the processes and value streams that you follow. So a product needs to be managed, certainly, and there's a lot of great literature out there around IT product management and product ownership. Look at the works of, Roman Pinchler, Melissa Perry, some of the writings from people like John Cutler. Don Reinertson, amazing stuff. But as I said earlier, in my opinion, the product exists to be able to deliver the service. The product in of itself, the functionality in of itself, doesn't mean anything unless it's connected to a service in the backend. And so for me, whilst yes, absolutely, the product is absolutely critical. Your banking app is critical for you to be able to pay your bill, but it requires that service in the backend to actually pay that bill. And so for me, that's a relationship between the product and service. The service is the actual point of value creation. The product is your channel to access those resources that allow you to create that value.
Thank you, Akshay. I'll take up the last question of the evening, which is coming from Anitesh. How ITIL will be helpful or efficient in consulting or recruitment domain? It's a different question.
It is a good question. I mean, we are starting to see a number of job roles and adverts which are already starting to reference ITIL 4, which is brilliant. And I think that momentum will just increase over time. Over time, more and more people are going to be ITIL 4 certified. They're going to have skills that are more relevant for IT organizations of today and tomorrow. And we're going to see more and more job roles that specifically call out ITIL 4 qualifications. From a consulting point of view, again, although consultants, and I've been a consultant for many years, although consultants may brand themselves as an ITIL consultant, really what they're consulting is ITSM. And any good ITSM consultant will not only call upon ITIL, but other frameworks as well. That approach has not changed with the introduction of ITIL 4. That is almost a universal approach to consulting. And I'm actually now starting to think that maybe I should do a podcast episode Axelos now has a podcast, and I'm a host. I'm actually thinking maybe I should do a podcast to talk about consulting in ITSM. But my point is that consulting in ITSM has not changed just because of the introduction of ITIL 4. That's more like saying, I now have leather seats in my car. The car is still the same. It's still got the same engine. You're still reliant on other suppliers to provide you with the bits and pieces you need to run your car. You've got a slightly different experience related to one aspect of your car, but the car is still the car. So consulting is not changing just because of ITIL 4.
Right. Right. So, Akshay, I think with that, I have tried to cover most of the questions. I have tried to cover, I think, mostly 90% of the questions. Thank you very much for answering all of them with kind of patience which you have. And maybe a few of the questions which were not answered, you think, I think Stuart can help you people to understand about how you can get them answered. So, that's all about from us. So, Stuart, you would like to do some closing statements?
Did we lose Stuart?
I'm not sure if.
No, I'm unfortunately was muted. Akshay, if you'd like to take this opportunity to say your last closing words and let people know how to get in touch with you.
Sure. A couple of things. On Twitter, I'm at Blowboy, which you can see at the end of the LinkedIn profile as well. Happy to connect with the audience. All I would request is if you're sending me a connection request, please send a note to say that you listen to this webinar. I get dozens of connection requests on a daily basis with absolutely no context, and I reject every one of them. So if you want to connect with me, please do include a note in your connection request and mention the Simplilearn webinar. So Twitter, LinkedIn are probably the best places. If you have any other questions about ITIL 4 or want to even provide some feedback about what you've read or what you've studied, please do send an email into ask@axelos.com, ask@axelos.com.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Prakash for hosting and doing an excellent job of moderating today. And thank everyone else here for listening in. I also want to do a special thanks to PeopleCert and Axelos for helping with this webinar and partnering with Simplilearn. And to let you all know, our next webinar comes up Thursday of next week in the data science domain. Ronald Van World will be talking about where to start your career path, whether in AI or data science. So for those of you interested in data science, please join us. For those of you who know people interested in data science and AI, please feel free to share this information with them. And again, you can also connect with Simplilearn on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And this concludes the webinar today. Again, thank you to everyone involved. And at this time, I would like you to go ahead and log off of WebEx and have a great rest of your evening or day.
Take care, everyone. Remember to wash your
Thank you.
hands.
Yep.
Yeah,
Have a wonderful day, evening to everyone.
and stay safe.
Yep.